3, 2, 1. The gun goes off and I take off. Where am I going? I don't really know. It's always been this way. The gun goes off and I run. I don't ask questions, I just go. I've always been good at running. On a track, from the pain, toward people who didn't know how to hold me. Because if I kept moving, I didn't have to feel it. When life threw another hurdle at me, I just pivot to the next race. No big deal. As long as I was running, I was safe. But what happens when life finally catches up to the boy who was born to run? We'll find out on today's episode of Honestly, It's a Lot. Hey there, my name's Greg. This is a podcast, and honestly, it's a lot. In today's episode, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about myself through the story of how I even got to this podcast in the first place. It was a dark and stormy night. I'm just kidding. There's no one place this story starts, except for the one place I'm about to tell you. I'm a 30-year-old gay man from Luther, Oklahoma. So childhood trauma aside, I was kind of doomed from the start. But despite the odds being stacked against me, I've survived religious trauma, toxic family dynamics, homophobia before I even had the words to know what gay was, a stalker, and a bevy of other absolutely ridiculous situations brought on the poor decision-making of myself and the people around me. No, but for real. This is a story of a person who just wanted so badly to be loved, but was never given the proper tools to actually get there. It's the story of a boy obsessed with TV who only ever wanted that moment in the rain where everything finally comes together as he kisses the love of his life. Only to realize it's all fantasy. It's TV. It's fake. But not in the ways you think. The truth is, those moments are real. Or I choose to believe they are anyway. They just aren't handed to you. You have to work for them. Love doesn't just show up with a bow on it. It takes effort. It takes growth. Love has to be earned by both people. And even then, it doesn't always end up the way you thought it would. But I still believe love can conquer all. So if it didn't end the way you planned, maybe that just means it did its job. It conquered something, just not in the way you expected. It's us humans that get in the way. I know that's shocking, but we're the problem. We choose to stay. We choose the things that harm us in the name of comfort, not love. And of course, I'm not talking about domestic violence or situations like that. But I know from my own experience, I've broken my own heart more times than anyone else ever has. I was Britney Spears, up on that stage, carrying them with me. The boys involved, they were just the snakes I was holding on to. I know, that Britney Spears metaphor was deep. But you're probably wondering, what does any of that have to do with me or this podcast? But don't worry, I'll explain. This episode is my way of introducing myself through the choices I made in love. Choices that over time brought me to a point where I was just done. Physically, mentally, emotionally. I was tired of my own shit. And I feel like my love life is the perfect place to start the story that is me. Because in the final stretch, where love should have carried me across the finish line, it ended up being the thing that finally took me out of the race. I was a late bloomer in a lot of ways, so it's no surprise I didn't have my first kiss until I was a couple months away from turning 19. Fun fact, I had my first kiss and sucked my first dick all in the same night. Because you gotta love efficiency. But then, because the universe has a wicked sense of humor, I went and watched my former high school basketball team play in the area tournament, sitting right next to people I used to go to church with. Sweating like a whore in church, more like sweating like a whore at a basketball game, literally sitting at crossroads of where he's been, church, and where he's going, dicks. And honestly, it was so poetic, I know the universe was laughing with me, because what the fuck? So I'm sure you're all thinking that the transition from being on my knees at church to being on my knees in other ways was smooth, but you'd be wrong. Growing up closeted and too afraid to be myself meant constantly hiding. Because if people saw the real me, they'd reject me. So I just made sure that never happened. I don't think I ever really knew how to have fun. Not in the real, in the moment fun. Because I was always following the rules I created in my head. Rules designed to keep my little faggy self at bay. And you can't have fun if you live in your head and not in the moment. I'd love to say that when I came out at 21, everything changed, that I became this vibrant, fully formed version of myself. And in some ways, I did, or at least I started to. But the road to becoming my true self was blocked once again, and this time by the lurker. The lurker. That's a story for another time. Let's just say she was my best friend. She stalked me. She catfished me. She kept me tangled in a world of chaos and codependency without me even knowing. I only bring her up now because she's an important stop on the timeline. One we'll probably come back to later. Also, I just realized it ties into the theme of my sad birthdays because I found out she was my stalker the day before my 22nd birthday. She was the final thread connecting me to the life I had in Luther. The closet, the hiding. She was the last piece of that chapter. What followed was about 2.5 years of self-discovery, the kind I've been longing for. I entered a world where I wasn't just accepted, I was celebrated, loved, held. It was the first time I felt like I could truly be myself. Or more importantly, where I could figure out who that self even was. The gay community took me in with open arms and open legs, but seriously, it was a beautiful season. And it all led me to January 1st, 2019, where 24-year-old Greg was asked to be someone's boyfriend for the very first time. Confetti was falling. The ball had just dropped. It felt like the movie was over. The credits were rolling. But unfortunately, this wasn't a movie. This was real life. And life doesn't end just because one story wraps up with a perfect bow. So the confetti falls, and at 24 years old, Greg enters his very first relationship with the computer guy. What follows is the amazingly beautiful and tragic story of two star-crossed lovers, desperate to hold on to each other, but destined to fail. The computer guy often felt like he was the cause of most of our issues. And while I never fully believed that, I also couldn't figure out what was really wrong. Looking back, I realized that so many of my ideas about love came from chaotic examples I saw growing up, or from TV and movies. I was stuck in this pick me, choose me, love me mindset like something straight out of Grey's Anatomy. I clung to him and to our relationship, even when letting go would have been healthier for both of us. The truth is, I wasn't really listening to him. When he told me we weren't right for each other, I refused to believe it. I had the old way of thinking that love could conquer everything, but instead, it led us into a cycle of fighting, disappointment, and unmet expectations on both sides, because I didn't understand what the saying truly meant at the time. We were two very different people with very different ideas about love, and the standards we held for each other, they created the perfect breeding ground for resentment and anger. And I wonder now how much damage I caused by holding on so tightly when I should have let go. In my attempt to save us, I was hurting us both. And that's where accountability comes in. I had to take a hard look at myself and realize that my actions, my unwillingness to listen, and my sometimes unrealistic expectations were a huge part of the problem. But I just didn't see those things right away. When I look back now, I see two people who clearly loved each other with everything they had, each in their own way. But they lost it all because they were never taught how to love. Neither of us had the proper tools to understand what was really going on. You had me, the dreamer with a huge heart that hits like a force in nature, and the computer guy, the practical one, with an equally big heart who just didn't know how to receive. We were together off and on for about 4.5 years, and in that time, I moved to Dallas from my tiny town of Luther, Oklahoma. We couldn't leave each other alone, even though we both knew we weren't happy. Not truly happy anyways. We chose comfort. We chose familiarity. We didn't want to lose each other. I had high expectations. And as mentioned earlier, sometimes unrealistic ones. And I think the disappointment of not being able to meet them was too much for the both of us. He thought he didn't love me properly. And maybe he still thinks that. I don't know. I guess I shouldn't speak for him, but this is what I imagine in my head anyway. And at the end of the day, the story isn't about him. It's about me. The truth is, he loved me in his own way, and I was just too stubborn to accept that. That doesn't absolve him of his responsibility for the breakdown of our relationship, let's be clear. But like I said, we're not focused on him. We're focused on me. This is the story of how I got the podcast. Keep up. You got so into the drama you forgot our goal, didn't you? Messy. I could sit here all day and tell you all the even messier parts of my relationship with the computer guy and the ways he wronged me. And I'm sure he could do the same about me. But the truth is, those parts don't matter. Dragging him wouldn't change the outcome. Pretending it was all his fault wouldn't have brought us back together. And deep down, I knew something was off about how much blame he was putting on himself. But I didn't have the language for what I was feeling. I didn't have the experience. Not yet. And that wouldn't come until the bartender. But first, let's take a break and listen to this very real ad. Do you struggle with unresolved feelings, blurry emotional boundaries, or deep-rooted trauma disguised as love and friendship? Introducing Clarity, the revolutionary breakthrough you only discover after those pesky gas station slushy machines make you cry. You survive your post-breakup hair change, or your mom is officially tired of hearing you vent the same story on loop. Clarity, it's not available in the moment. It kicks in weeks, months, or even years later, when you suddenly realize you are the problem too. Side effects may include rose-colored glasses, a false sense of importance in other people's lives, and the sudden realization that you don't belong. Ask your doctor if Clarity is right for you. And if you're a real sponsor, ask yourself, is charity right for you? Because I need some. Okay, let's check in. See where we're at, and more importantly, if anyone's getting the point so far. Not because I think it's too complex or that you won't follow. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page here. So, chaotic childhood, check. Childhood friend turned stalker, check. One beautifully tragic first relationship, big check. Check, check, check. Now that we've recapped where we've been, let's talk about where we're going. All of the moments I've shared so far have one common thread. At the center of it all is a boy who just wants to be loved. A boy who holds on to people and things so tightly because everything good leaves eventually, right? Wrong. Things that no longer serve you leave, and the longer you hold on, the more it hurts. Which brings us to the next part. The part that opened my eyes and finally let me see the bigger picture. The one where I stop being the boy who's desperate for a white knight to come whisk me away and start being the boy who's no longer desperate for love, but is ready for it. Well, that unfortunately brings us to the bartender. Just kidding. But before we get into that relationship, I feel like some context is going to be needed. The computer guy and I were in an open relationship. Yeah, I know. Really buried the lead there. It wasn't important to the heart of the story, but it's important for what's coming next. So let's rewind. I met the bartender during a weekend at a gay campsite. Yeah, exactly what you're picturing. A weekend full of homos in the woods, drinking, dancing, and doing whatever it is you think we were doing all weekend. Anyway, we hit it off as friends. That's also when I met his partner, Red. We're using codenames, keep up. Cut to the next weekend, the computer guy is mid-thrust, literally mid-thrust, and I get a text from Red asking if we want to hook up with him and the bartender. The computer guy and I broke up for the first time shortly after that whole mid-thrust text moment, and our newfound couple friends, they chose me in the breakup. They were there for me through 2 more reunions with the computer guy. And honestly, through so much more over the next couple of years, I was even invited to be in a throuble with them. But sadly, they were stuck in a similar loop as the computer guy and I. They'd just been on it way longer. And during all of that, even while I was still with the computer guy, I became very close to Red. That's right, not the bartender, Red. It got to the point where people were joking that Red was my second boyfriend. Again, a story for another time. And fun fact, the guy that eventually joined their throuple, we'll call him the jokester. Yeah, he took Red for himself. And the jokester hated me. That brings us to February 2023, when the computer guy and I broke up for the last time. That breakup in itself was kind of interesting, because honestly, I don't even really remember how or why we got back together in the first place. Especially considering he had already moved back to Oklahoma City a few months earlier, and I was still living in Dallas. But like most of our attempts, it was short-lived. The distance would be the thing that finally drove the nail into the coffin. It finally set us free. But during that final doomed stint with the computer guy, the jokester moved in and stole my other man. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. We're almost done with context, I promise. I just want to make sure you have all the relevant information. That being, somehow I went from never dating anyone to open relationships, second boyfriends, and all the jealousy, drama, gay campsite entanglements, and questionable after parties that come with it. Okay, I said I was almost done with context, so I almost forgot one of the biggest pieces. During all of this, the bartender was never one to let a moment pass without reminding me, and literally everyone else, that he was in love with me. He would vent to the computer guy, my actual boyfriend, about how in love with me he was. Yeah, to my boyfriend. Well, the official one anyways, though I'm sure he vented to the other one too. And even though I had this weird obsession with Red, I always made a point to never treat the bartender like a third wheel in his own relationship. There were times when Red and I were clearly closer, but I did everything I could to make sure the bartender never felt less than. The jokester could never. And that, finally, brings us to the post-computer guy era, where I lost my connection with Red, but found an even better one with the bartender. The summer of 2023, I found myself again, briefly. It only took 3 breakups to finally get my revenge body. It was club, pool party, another club, another pool party, fun. I call it my fun ho summer, the season I finally reclaimed a little bit of my power. And during that time, as the bartender and Red continued to grow further apart, the end of their relationship started to feel inevitable. We found comfort in each other, the kind we had both been longing for but never had access to before. And that comfort, it culminated in a tea dance at Pride, September 2023. So now here I am, 29, finally past the hurt of my first relationship, thriving. And he, the bartender, was finally free from the toxic relationship that had held him back for so long. We had been hooking up off and on throughout the year, but this time, he asked me to go with him. And even if I didn't realize it then, I think that's when I started falling in love. As I mentioned before, it was my fun host summer. But after hooking up with the bartender that night, after having the most amazing time in Pride, I experienced something that made me realize I wanted more. Yeah, the sex was out of this world. I don't even care if it's embarrassing to admit that. I'm just being honest. But mind-blowing sex aside, it was the moment after. Laying in bed, holding each other, giggling. That meant the most. The closeness, the intimacy, the moment. It was magic. But sadly, the credits still didn't roll. I've given you all the context you need to see why things with the bartender didn't work out. We both got out of toxic relationship patterns just to fall into new ones of our own. Patterns where I knew things were moving too fast, where I knew it was too good to be true, but I did it anyway. Why? Because for the first time in my life, I was experiencing that head in the clouds, write his name all over your notebook, head over heels kind of love that I didn't get to experience growing up. It was absolutely delusional, but the way I felt, undeniable. So once again, we have a dreamer with a huge heart full of love that hits you like a ton of bricks, and someone who just wasn't ready for impact. Okay, so pattern established. Got it. How do we break it? Your guess is as good as mine. Did you not hear me when I said I wasn't taught these things? Just kidding. But seriously, you remember that thing that was missing? The thing where the computer guy was taking most of the blame in our relationship and it didn't sit right with me? Well, I finally have the words to say why. The computer guy was my grenade. The bomb sent to blow my heart wide open and question everything I thought I knew about life and love. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was destruction. Emotional, spiritual, foundational. Losing him didn't just hurt me. It rearranged me. And honestly, I needed it. Because if I hadn't shattered the way I did, I might still be pretending that everything was fine. The bartender, he was the bullet I was never meant to dodge. The painful reminder that when you play with fire, you don't just get burned. You get shot. Right through the heart. And Bon Jovi was right. I am to blame. Because honestly, Stevie Wonder could have seen that shit coming. Yeah, I said it, because that relationship was mostly sex. It was the one area we actually connected in while struggling with literally everything else. And don't get me wrong, the sex with the computer guy, amazing too. But our relationship was so much more than just physical. The bartender, the connection lived in the body. It was carnal, consuming, and I was obsessed. One blew my world apart, the other buried itself in me so slowly, I didn't realize I was bleeding. So seriously, what can we do about that pattern? Come on, I think you should already know we choose ourselves. More importantly, we listen to ourselves. I'm going to give a brief overview of the past 5 years of my life, so if you think this was wild and messy, you should hear all the dirty details. There's so many moments when my gut was screaming, telling me I deserve better. And honestly, both of my exes deserve better than me too, which is kind of the point of them being exes. Again and again, I chose comfort over love, and I paid the price, over and over, until one day, I decided I had enough. The breakup with the bartender, fucking disaster. And I woke up knowing I didn't belong in Dallas anymore. The past year has been hard, it's been lonely, and that's why I'm pouring my heart into this podcast. Because if there's one thing I've learned throughout all the chaos, it's this. No matter how messy or chaotic life gets, it can still be beautiful, and it's never too late to choose yourself. These stories, they weren't just detours. They were roadblocks I ran into on the way to figuring out who I'm really supposed to be. But more importantly, they were checkpoints. Moments that left behind clues, even if I didn't realize it at the time. Lessons that I wouldn't have had to learn if my childhood had been different, but lessons that are important regardless. Lessons that so many people before me tried to learn, but got lost in the chaos before they could. And I'm just trying not to be one of them. And don't worry, after all that chaos, I only want marriage and monogamy for my next relationship. That brings us to our last segment. Honestly, what I should have said was ... This is a segment where I'll ask guests to share a moment, any moment, where they didn't say what they wanted to say. And then they get to say it now. And it's just me again. Someone should really talk to the boss about all this conflicting information. But seriously, I originally planned to drop 2 interviews for the premiere, but the intro episode did a great job introducing the pod, just not so much introducing me. Anyways, you've heard me yap long enough, so I'll keep it short and sweet with what I should have said to younger me. What I should have said was ... Hey there, little guy. You don't have to be afraid of being yourself. All the things you hate about yourself, they're going to be celebrated. Your voice, your personality, your feminine qualities, your body. Every piece of you you've tried to quiet down will one day be loved loudly. You are never too much. You just haven't found a place to land yet. And maybe, just maybe, you can stop running. Because sometimes the finish line isn't out there somewhere. It's right where you are. And maybe I shouldn't have been the one to say it, but nobody else did. Well, that does it for honestly what I should have said was ... Which brings us to the end of this week's episode. If you want to continue the madness and you've got a story that deserves to be told, whether it's funny, emotional, unhinged, or just a little too specific to explain to your group chat, I'd love to hear it. Check the link in my bio to find us on social media, streaming platforms, or to pitch your story. It's all there. It's always evolving, just like the pod. Until next time, honestly, that was a lot.